My name is Holly Sanders. I'm 31. 3 days after coming home from the hospital with my newborn, I handed my father-in-law's accusation back to him. In the form of a single envelope, he'd said, "We're not putting our name on a child that might not be his." I didn't argue. I walked to the counter, picked up an unopened envelope from the hospital, and gave it to my husband instead. He read one line. His face changed. He told his own parents to leave. Like and subscribe, drop your city below. Let me take you back 6 years to my grandmother's kitchen and a lesson I didn't understand until I needed it most. My grandmother Ruth raised me on Larkspur Lane in a house that smelled like cinnamon, with a screen door that squealed no matter how many times it got oiled. She kept a chipped blue mug on the windowsill nobody else was allowed to touch. When I was 11, I heard my parents talk about money the way other people talk about weather. Flat, bored. Ruth noticed. She'd take me to her garden and let me dig until my hands were dirty and my mind was clear. One afternoon she told me, "The people who love you never need proof. The people who need proof were never planning to stay." I thought she meant friends. She meant family. My parents' house, 3 streets over, was fluorescent and transactional. My mother once called raising me an investment. I was 8. I remember feeling like a line item. By 17, I understood something was different about how Ruth loved me. I had no power to change my family, yet I only knew I'd need to remember how she taught me to stand still in a room that had already decided who I was. Ruth died when I was 24. I held her hand until it went cold. 5 days later, I overheard my mother on the phone, cheerful, saying the house would finally free up some liquidity. That's the word they use for everything that used to be love. I said nothing. I filed it away. I kept watering Ruth's tomatoes alone, even after the house was listed. Around then, I met Weston, patient, steady, someone who actually waited for answers. But his family had their own liquidity language, the family name, the trust. I noticed I said nothing. Being underestimated was its own shelter. 3 weeks before our daughter was born, Weston handed me a sealed letter from Ruth's attorney, meant to be opened once I became a mother. She'd left me a modest trust, structured by an advisor named Marcus, protected specifically from people who confuse blood with belonging. 2 nights before the birth, I overheard Harold on the porch telling Diane they needed proof, just to be safe. For the trust, I recognized the language instantly. I texted Marcus 2 words, "He's talking." 3 days later, in my own living room, Harold said his rehearsed line. I already knew I'd been protected long before he opened his mouth. That night, Harold and Diane went to sleep thinking they'd drawn a line in the family. They had no idea it had already been drawn around them. Marcus explained that Ruth's trust was untouchable by Harold's family. Weston wanted more. He wanted the bloodline clause removed from his own family's trust entirely. A week later, Diane called, soft and maternal, wanting to start fresh. I recognized the fake kindness. "I'll think about it," I said. Nothing more. Weston's younger sister called too, worried, sensing something wrong. It reminded me this wasn't only about winning. The night before the restructuring, I sat outside Ruth's old house. The door still squealed. I wish they'd protected people instead of bloodlines. But wishes don't hold up. What Ruth left me did, I cried. Not from weakness, from clarity. At 11:50 p.m., Weston sat with Marcus on a call, finalizing the new trust. No bloodline clauses. Everything solely in our daughter's name. He signed at alas 2:03 ng umaga. I am 31. I am a mother. The ground finally felt solid. Across town, Harold slept, still believing his family name protocol had somewhere left to go. He'd learn otherwise in about 9 hours. At our daughter's christening, Harold pulled me aside, asking to revisit trust logistics. I told him it was already restructured, and his place in her life now depended on how he treated her mother, not paperwork he no longer controlled. He looked at me like I was still the woman frozen in that living room. I wasn't. I hadn't been for 6 weeks. Ruth used to say people who need proof were never planning to stay. I thought she meant strangers. She meant family. Harold and Deanne are still around, slower now, more careful, earning ground back a little at a time. Marcus still manages the trust every year, one email. Everything is exactly as it should be. I still keep Ruth's chipped mug on my windowsill. I think of her every time I water my garden, and I think, peace was never theirs to take. It was only ever mine to give away. I don't anymore. If you've ever had to prove your place in your own family, tell me in the comments. Subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There are more to come.